Welcome to these modern, flexible working surroundings that we should try and get used to, probably. Lovely to see you at another instalment of Cabinet. So hopefully nothing too contentious on the agenda this morning. I say that every time, I know, and we'll fly through, but we'll dive into the agenda proper. Minutes of the last meeting. Has anybody got anything to flag, raise, criticise, moan about? No? All happy? Great. Apologies for absence then. Any? All here. Delightful. Lovely to see you all, John. Great. And any declarations of interest before we start the agenda proper? No. Great. Thank you very much. So we'll move then on swiftly to the Sustainable Procurement Policy. Councillor Jackson, can you introduce that for us?
Yeah, thanks very much, Leader. I'm sure colleagues will be aware we spend around £600 million a year with external suppliers. We're one of the main procurers in the county, and we lead the way in delivering sustainable procurement. At the moment, we've made a lot of progress towards delivering local spend with small enterprises in particular through these contracts. Council's sustainable procurement policy builds on a strong foundation and sets out the proposals to achieve value for money from our commissioning and procurement activity, whilst at the same time delivering environmental, social and economic benefits. This will be through ensuring our contracts are awarded locally where possible and generating benefits not only to the council but also to residents and to the local economy, whilst at the same time minimising damage and promoting the health of our environment. I'm happy to answer any questions on it, Leader.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who wants to speak to this item? Keith?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I welcome this report. It's something I've been banging on about for years and years and years about local spend and the economic benefit that brings. And I do appreciate that there's a slight friction between procurement and redevelopment and economic development because of the fact that keeping prices down and local spend don't always match. But I would like it that maybe when we ever do anything along these lines again, that the Economic Development Committee, me and my team are more involved in going through it, so we can put our 10 pence in. But this is brilliant, and it's nice to see how much we're actually spending locally. So I really welcome this report because it encourages job creation and also sustains the businesses we've already got. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, that's right. And I think there's a duty for us, obviously, to grow our local economy in that sense. We've been talking in the last few weeks about the opportunities around STEP, for example, and the benefits of local supply chains. I think it's important that we formalise this kind of approach. Is there anybody else who wants to speak or raise questions on this item? No? Okay, in that case, you'll see that the recommendation simply asks us to approve the sustainable procurement policy as out in the agenda. All those in favour? That's everybody. Great, thank you very much. And we move swiftly on to agenda item 5, LED street lighting improvements. Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. And this is a great good news story for us. This is the, if you like, the final jigsaw in the picture of LED lighting. This is investing basically a couple of £1 million to save £600,000 a year in energy costs. We are in a world at the moment of rising costs. This is where we are investing to save money and to save costs. So we're using capital to be able to save those rising revenue costs. The beauty of this scheme is that investing that £2 million capital, because we're saving £600,000 a year at today's costs, then that's only just over 3 years payback. But the way costs are rising at the moment, then that payback will reduce quite significantly. I'm pretty confident of that. This is something that is proven because this is, as I say, this is the last piece of the jigsaw in the county jigsaw, if you like, because since 2015, we've invested £5 million capital in LED lighting. And to date, since 2015, that's saved £12.5 million in revenue costs. So it's a substantial saving so far already, and that saving will continue. So this technology of LED is far superior. It helps save the environment. Since 2015, we've saved 89,000 tonnes of carbon. So that helps save the environment. The LED lighting is more reliable. And so all in all, it's a major win for us, Chairman, and that will only increase the savings that we are actually achieving. So I thoroughly recommend this. There are plenty of good reasons to do this as soon as possible, and it will all be scheduled to be completed by the end of this financial year. So those savings will be coming in continued from that point on. So I move that recommendations.
Thank you, Neil, particularly pertinent in the light of both energy cost and budget conversations that we are all having and trying to manage at the minute. So good news that we're able to finish the job in that sense, and a big couple of weeks for Bassetlaw. Lots of millions of pounds going into Bassetlaw, which we like, and can shout from the rooftops, Chancellor Taylor, can't we? It'd be good. Any questions and thoughts, queries on street lighting? It's a fairly straightforward, positive piece of news. Okay, in that case, I'm guessing I'm going to go find the piece in the agenda that says the recommendations, if you bear with me, that it asks us to confirm that the project will go forward and approve effectively the capital funding to do that. Can I ask all in favour of approving those recommendations? That is unanimous again. All very smooth and efficient. Right, agenda item 6, which is a devolution update. We have had very few formal opportunities to kind of update in public meetings on this subject. So really just a chance to continue to keep the public informed and to raise progress on this massive project. Obviously, you'll have seen over the course of the summer that our deal deadlines were moved from October to the middle of August. That was a huge logistical and resource and time challenge for a lot of people and officers. So a huge thank you to all of those officers involved in making that happen on time. What it means is that our funding pots are now confirmed from that point of view, and that 1.14 billion gain share pot is actually the single biggest gain share pot ever devolved to anybody in a kind of English regional devolution deal, which is really positive news. We are now working on the next phases, which look like pulling together things like governance, how this will work, who will decide what and where, and those practicalities before we move to public consultation later on in the year. And we're already working on proposals to spend some of the initial capital funding. So there was funding for environmental enhancements, improvements, things like retrofit. We've been working with district and boroughs to bring forward some of those projects this year, and equally further for bringing forward brownfield housing sites. So those things are already underway with partners. Repeat the importance of those partners, which again I keep taking every opportunity in public meetings like this to do, that we've worked very closely with districts and boroughs all the way through, and that continues to be the intention as we work through governance proposals. Obviously we want to be able to use the full range of powers that are devolved to us, including things like planning, that districts and boroughs are very important partners in, and we want to make sure every part of the county has a fair shout at getting access to the benefits and investment that will come through the deal. So we'll continue to work with our districts and boroughs and other stakeholders across business and education to bring this forward. As I say, there'll be a full public consultation into the autumn, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks for a full council meeting to approve that consultation. We'll have more details then. We're working through what that looks like now in terms of the information that will be made available and what the consultation document will look like, but we'll come back to do that in more detail when we're asked to formally approve it in a few weeks' time. The key headline, I guess, in terms of updates is, as I say, this is the single biggest devolved gain share pot that government's ever given to anybody, and that's something that I think we can be very pleased about, the opportunity to utilise that. And I've mentioned STEP earlier on. I think it highlights the opportunity of the kinds of things that we can do with these powers, not least the ability to draw in major investment around sites and to build areas or investment zones or whatever it may be within this structure that we can bring in infrastructure, we can bring in investment, we can bring in good, well-paid jobs in those kinds of sectors. But actually, we'll also have the opportunity then through devolved adult skills to build a pipeline of qualifications and careers around that for local people. We'll have the opportunity to have more control over the transport infrastructure that fits around that, to negotiate a transport part of funding to be able to deliver that, and to have those delivery mechanisms here within the region instead of Whitehall. And I think STEP is a good example of the kinds of projects and the kinds of things we'll be able to deliver for local residents in the future through this mechanism. So I hope that is a positive step forward. I don't think there's too much else to add other than, as I say, to highlight the continued kind of progress of all of this. I'll come round Cabinet if anyone's got anything to say, and then I know Councillor Foley wanted to ask a question. Keith, I saw your hand first.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think for me, this is quite an exciting prospect, really. It's the economic possibilities that this will bring to Nottinghamshire. I think the actual amount of money, the £1.14 billion, will pale into insignificance when the inward investment that will follow this sort of move will come. And I'm sure we'll be on top of that to make sure that we maximise those possibilities. And I think we're getting ourselves into a bit of a perfect storm, really, when you talk about the fact that we've got the Freeport, we've got Step Fusion, we've got the investment zones to look at, all for Nottinghamshire. So I know the devolution deal is about the Midlands, East Midlands devolution deal, but we are positioning ourselves as a county council in a really strong position with a really good foundation of proving that we can deliver on what we say we can deliver. And I think that'll put us in a really good place when whoever the mayor is, we go to that person and say, look, we've got these things here, give us some money towards it. I think they'll be mad not to look at us very seriously. So I'm quite excited about all the what this might bring. Thank you, Chairman.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Girling. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. As you mentioned, transport, and in the prospectus, it talks about a better connected future within the devolution deal, and that can only be welcome because at a strategic transport level, you're integrating across 4 authorities, so that's a much more efficient way of operating, and we can involve everybody in that. This is an opportunity to involve everybody, not just in roads, but also then public transport, integrating, and when we have things like concessionary fare schemes, they can be all integrated in together and have integrated ticketing on public transport, and it's much wider picture and much more efficient. So that's just a couple of examples where this is to be welcomed.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barney.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to take a moment to express thanks, really, to all the people that have worked so hard and put politics aside to bring this deal together. I think I heard you reference at some point, Ben, that you spent more time over the summer with David Mellon than you had your own wife. And I think that's I don't know how true that is, but a tribute to all of you to have worked so hard in such a short time frame to bring this deal together, which is just actually extraordinary. And you, I think, have underplayed quite significantly the great news we had this week about STEP coming to our region. This is extraordinary. And combine that with the devolution prospects as well and the Freeport, this is incredible news for our region. And I just wanted to, seeing as we're in Rushcliffe this morning, and I know there's a number of us here also sit on Rushcliffe Borough Council as ward members here in Rushcliffe. We're in the southernmost district of our region here. We abut Leicestershire, and I just didn't want to miss the opportunity to say, from my perspective, I hope we're doing all we can to encourage our friends and neighbours in Leicestershire to come into the fold and be part of this deal. My postal address, I don't know whether I dare declare this as a Nottinghamshire County Councillor, actually is LE12 5RQ. There's a number of us in Rushcliffe that have Leicestershire postcodes. Councillor Cotty is looking across the room at me here as well. For those of us in the south, we identify as much, in many respects, with Leicestershire as we do Nottinghamshire. So I just really, this is an appeal from my heart. Come on, Leicestershire, get involved with us. Thanks, anyway. Thank you. Carry on.
Thank you, Matt. Suitably effusive. It's correct to say, I think that the relationships between partners around the county and around Derbyshire as well particularly with our district and borough colleagues here in Nottinghamshire, haven't always been brilliant. But I think over the last year or so, we've really made some amazing progress from that, actually, to the point where we've consistently, unanimously supported a way forward on this across party and across all the different geographies, which is really good and positive step forward. And I hope that the structures of it will formalise that collaboration in the sense that we will have to, regardless of personalities that may or may not come forward in the future, we'll have to work in that joined up way, which can only be a good thing. In terms of Leicestershire, you no doubt will have seen the calls from Leicestershire leaders to be a part of it, and they're obviously continuing that conversation with government. It'll be up to them at that stage, but we've always been clear that the door is open in the future because economically it makes a lot of sense. So thank you for that. I've got Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I don't think we should underestimate how big a step it is to get this here today in front of us. Along with Councillor Clark 7 or 8 years ago, when we were both district council, borough council leaders, we spent countless hundreds of hours, Neil, didn't we, in discussions about this. It was incredibly difficult to bring everyone together. It was incredibly difficult to get access into central government. And I think, without wishing to embarrass you, Leader, without your unique dual role, we wouldn't be in the position that we're in today, because without the access to and the contacts with ministers down in Westminster and civil servants, I don't think we would be anywhere near these steps. So all credit to you for that. I know from what was on the table on what was very much a watered down version of this 7 or 8 years ago, had we delivered half of that, had that gone ahead and we delivered half of it, we'd be in a far better position today. So I don't underestimate the benefits that will come out of this. And so fully support it. The gain share pot wasn't even in the game 7 or 8 years ago. So that's a huge step forward as well. So I hope that this is going to get unanimous support this morning.
Thank you, Richard. You're too kind. I don't even pay for those kinds of compliments. It's nice. Nice to hear them. But look, it's no, it's really a positive step. And I think the key thing is gives us the opportunity, as you alluded to keep going back and keep asking in the future, which we could have had and have missed. It was certainly helpful, I have to say, to be able to engage with ministers on the final days of trying to tick this thing off when you come up against all those last hurdles that just need unblocking against tight deadlines. And we managed to do that. So that's positive news. Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. When I indicated to speak, effectively, it's before some of the comments that have just been made. So I'm almost repeating what's already been said, and I'll just join in the sycophantic tributes to your role as leader. But just to extend it actually to the new chief executive, who obviously took a significant lead role as an officer in the discussions, debates, collaboration and negotiations that have achieved this result. And I suppose the point I would make is that there were a number of people who questioned the efficacy of a member of parliament being the leader of a county council, and whether those two roles would be in conflict or whether they could be harmonious. And I think the point's already been made, particularly by Richard. Your unique position and the ability to be able to not only knock on doors, but walk through those doors at Westminster to be able to bring this deal forward. We read in the media that there are a number of other authorities now who cite the North Yorkshire deal and the D2N2 deal effectively, as the pathfinders, and they are now fearing that they're left behind. And I'm quite sure that we wouldn't be in this position, but for Adrian's negotiating skills and obviously your access and your drive and energy and enthusiasm that's actually brought this forward. So, as I say, I apologise for being a bit sycophantic with my comments, but I think it's worth saying. Thank you.
Very kind of you, Chris. I started by thanking officers for the work. It's worth saying our chief executive, our former chief executive, and all sorts of officers around ours and other councils put an awful lot of work in over the summer to get this thing over the line. It was frantic, but nonetheless managed to do it, and very grateful for that. And they continue to put an awful lot of work in a way that is beyond the day job, frankly, because this is an extra thing that we've got to do and manage. So continue to be very grateful for that help and support. yeah, and said when we first started to do this, named a number of regional projects that we wanted to bring forward. And if we could get some of those projects over the line by being able to go from local to national and join the dots, then that would be great. And those were Step Fusion, which we've delivered or will deliver, Freeport, which is waiting to be approved, Development Corporation, which will get its powers in the legislation that's coming forward, the Evolution deal, which we are getting there. So thus far it is working, and I hope it proves the point in that sense. Gordon.
Thank you, Ben. I won't heap any further praise on you, Ben. I think plenty of people have done that already, so I'll leave that one alone. I was, Ben, actually going to ask you more about your special relationship with David Mellon, but bearing in mind we're live stream, but perhaps I better not do that. Now, in all seriousness, actually, what I was going to say this morning, we've talked about the contribution from yourself and others. We need to mention especially our legal services. You know that. They drove this forward, working every hour God imagined to make this happen in a very short time scale that we were then presented with. Let's not forget that, and all the people who supported them as well. It's so important. We wouldn't be in this position otherwise. And of course, our comms people are sitting in the back who have promoted, get that message out there. So that's really all I was going to add to the debate this morning. Thank you.
We're grateful, Gordon, and yeah, absolutely, all sorts of different areas of the council. And when you consider the range of powers in different areas that will come to us, unpicking current systems and protocols and how things work, and joining those together with partners, or trying to come to some shared view as to what those things should look like across a wider area. Particularly transport will be incredibly complicated in the first instance to try and manage, but the rewards in the form of the kinds of money West Midlands had £1 billion pot of extra funding for transport. The rewards are well worth it. It will take a lot of time and energy, and officers have thus far been brilliant. So I'm sure that they'll continue to be so. Councillor Fole, this is a good point to bring you in.
Thank you, but I'm not going to be sycophantic, but thank you for letting me ask the question. Just to say, just to acknowledge, though, that clearly there's an awful lot of work gone into this, and there is some serious money coming into the county. Not as much as I think you suggested. I mean, just to talk about the gain share pot for a minute. I mean, our research suggests it's not the best deal, but I won't necessarily kind of go down that route now. Perhaps have a conversation with that later. But it actually works out to £17 per person per year over 30 years. So just to bring it down to earth a little bit, since you've had so much praise heaped on you, but clearly there's some opportunities, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. I'm sure David Mellon enjoyed the conversations and the partnership as well, as much as you did, Ben. So just to sort of speak on his behalf, I just wanted to ask in particular about the geographical footprint and that in relation to the full public consultation. I'd like to hear from you actually what that full public consultation will mean, because one of the things that's concerned me, and I've raised this with you before, we've talked about it before, is actually whether people will actually really get this, whether they really understand it, whether they're interested in it, or how they think it will impact on them. And I know you weren't able to make the last East Midlands Council's exec meeting. I know it's not a dig. I know you can't get everywhere, but there was a lengthy discussion about why it's called the East Midlands Combined Authority, Mayoral Authority, and the Lincolnshire leader is particularly very concerned about this. So I'm sure has shared it with you before. Because what does that actually mean? And I'd be really interested to understand, because from what kind of Councillor Barney was just saying, are you saying here that you're in direct negotiations now for Leicestershire to join this deal? And if so, then I think you need to be honest about that and kind of share that in terms of the consultation, because it's a huge footprint, and I'm not sure how relevant we'll think that people will think that will be to them, and whether the third tier of government is actually going to deliver what we hope it's going to deliver. And clearly you've got a good comms team and you'll be able to get that over, but I'd like to understand how you're going to kind of be able to do this. Because one of the things that we saw I think it was in that government white paper, was it has to be rooted in a shared identity. Well, I don't see a shared identity across D2N2. I mean, I've met with Labour colleagues across D2N2, and particularly in Derbyshire, and they don't see a shared identity at all. If you think of the breadth and the depth of the D2N2 footprint, it's huge, and you're thinking about extending it further. I just think that needs to be explained to the public in a way that they can understand and engage with. So I suppose it comes down to two questions. Given those concerns I've just raised, can you please make it clear what the position is with Leicestershire and possible expansions across more of the East Midlands? Are you thinking about taking over the whole of the East Midlands? And also in terms of consultation, and I know this is probably set down in process and you can't change this. It's very late in the day. most people out there don't really know this is happening. We need to kind of make sure they understand that and engage with it. And I think that, well, I think that's me done. But I think although I can see the advantage, I can see why you were excited by it. I think we have to be realistic and understand actually its limitations and how this is going to impact on the people of this county. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Paul. There's a lot to get into there. I appreciate the points around the consultation. I'd argue perhaps with the point that it's late in the day. There's 18 months to go before we formally implement this and elect a mayor in that sense. So there's still a significant amount of time to go, and there's still time off the back of that public consultation, indeed prior to the legislation and the SI, which will be probably 6 months later, to make changes if the public are clear or adamant that we need to do that in any way. So without wanting to jump the gun on the content of the consultation, because we are working through that with those partners currently, and we'll come back in a couple of weeks and do that. Some of the officers involved in that are in the room and they'll have heard what you've said there, and no doubt we'll be happy to have a conversation with you around our thoughts and focus on that. If there are things you want to feed in, by all means, please do. But we'll be able to get into more detail as to what that will look like in a couple of weeks' time. Just to pick up on a couple of the other points that you've raised there. So there's been a bit of a conversation, I think, with a union about I forget which one, Unison maybe, about the scale of the gain share fund here. And the reason I say it's the biggest ever is because the quantum total amount of money is the biggest that anyone has ever offered. You mentioned the pound per head figure there. The range across the country historically has ranged from about £10 per person up to about 21, which I think is West Yorkshire. Ours is 17. And when you look at those that we compare with in terms of scale, Manchester and the West Midlands, there's a 10 and 13. And ours is 17. So that is significantly better than those more accurate
is to make things better for residents of the East Midlands, particularly in Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. And I think that is a very laudable aim. I mean, who would have envisaged 2 years ago when we were at County Hall that we'd be entering into an agreement with the City Council? And that is just the shift, both politically and within the organisations across the two counties has been enormous. I have to say, I have to thank both Adrian and Anthony. They put an enormous amount of work into this, helping Ben get this over the line. I think that is, I've watched that happen over the last 12 months, constantly reminding both of them that their day job is to ensure that our services are run properly for the people of Nottinghamshire. But that has been going on this despite, and I think watching all the authorities, and that's including the districts, working together with a common aim has been really upmoving. It's been a pleasure to watch, and long may it continue, because we will all benefit from that level of lobby. And it is incumbent on me to thank our partners. They have been statesmanlike in the way that they have taken this on board. And the likes of, for example, in the district, John Robinson, who's been the nominee for all the district councils, has gone the extra mile really to ensure that the support came through from the district councils, even Ashfield. Once we do get this over the line, my warning is, watch out, central government. The East Midlands is coming.
Well said. I've said a couple of times in the last week or so, I've been jealous of the West Midlands, I've been jealous of Teesside and the investment that we get, but we are the new economic centre of the universe. Long may it continue. Right, if nobody else wishes to speak, great. There's all that remains is for me to move recommendations which are on page 3 of the report, to note the progress and also agree that continuing engagement with partners ahead of coming back in a couple of weeks to approve the public consultation, but we'll tackle that at that time. So all those in favour of those recommendations? Unanimous as well. Thank you very much. That moves on to the final item on the agenda, which is financial monitoring report, period 5. Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'll ask Nigel to briefly run through the detail of the report itself. I just want to put it into some context, really. I'm sure colleagues will remember, looking at paragraph 2, the 24th of February, when we met to approve this year's budget, was the day that the war in the Ukraine broke out. Russia's invasion of Ukraine started during the meeting, in actual fact. And I think that just puts into context where we are. At that time, nobody was predicting the levels of inflation that we've got. Nobody was predicting that the global economy would go the way that it has. In addition to that, there's growing challenges in various parts of the council in terms of recruitment, pressure on pay, and inflation in various of the products that we rely on, particularly across highways. In particular, all those products is far in excess of the headline inflation rate, and by definition, therefore, it's far in excess of what we were expecting at the time. If you look at paragraph 3, I think we should really just mention colleagues across the council, elected members and officers in particular, for having managed within budgets and in the face of all those challenges to be less than 1%, so less than 0.8 of 1% of the council's budget, and to be as close to the budget we set in a completely different world as we are, I think, is a testament to Nigel and his team, to Adrian and to staff right across the organisation in reaching that challenge and actually continuing to deliver services throughout that time as well. There are challenges ahead, and there'll be a chance to discuss that at a later date as we move through the budget process for next year. But that was all I wanted to say, really, in introduction. Once Nigel's gone through the detail, we're happy to answer any questions between us.
Thank you, Richard. I was going to echo what Councillor Jackson has just said in terms of the process. We it comes to Cabinet once a quarter, but once a month there is a report in terms of the finances that go to the Cabinet Member for Finance, Richard Jackson. So we'll continue with that open and transparency in terms of the council's finances, which I think is very important for us going forward. As Richard has said, it is a credit to all of us in terms of the difficult challenges that the council has faced and all the councils across the country are facing in terms of the overspend that is declared at the moment or predicted at year end is only 4.4 million, and that colleagues with cabinet members' assistance are implementing measures to try and get that overspend down to near balanced budget as best as we can. The obvious situation is that some of those measures won't necessarily be successful because there are such inflationary pressures, and so we'll keep that under constant monitoring, and that's why we'll continue with providing monitoring information on a monthly basis, as well as providing briefing for opposition groups, as I do on a regular basis as well, so that we keep that openness and transparency. In terms of the report itself, I wasn't going to go through the details of the specific significant over and underspends because that's in the report. On the capital programme, though, even with these trying times, I think it's important to note that we've been successful in obtaining additional finances, particularly around Section 106 monies for the Flying High Academy Primary School in Hucknall and the Electronic Vehicle Infrastructure Fund and 800,000. I think there are key points. The fact that even though we're in challenging times, we are still moving forward in terms of the developments that are needed across the council for delivering our services. And the only other points to mention, I think, is on page 55 in terms of the PWLB standard maturity rates. The economic situation in terms of gilt prices is reflected so much in terms of that chart, in terms of the rising price of PWLB, albeit we didn't borrow any money last year. And it is unlikely in terms of the situation we are with the capital programme, even though we are delivering the capital programme, that we'll be borrowing again this year either. And that'll be it from me. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. I think I just echo the comment that I think to be, with inflation at the level it's at in particular, to be within 0.8% of our forecast in that sense is really fine piece of work. And when you hear some of the noise that comes out of other authorities around the country, it's positive to be able to say, although we have significant challenges, and we all do, both organisations and individuals, obviously, at the minute, that we are relatively in a reasonable position and hopefully have made some start and early work on mitigating some of those challenges and looking ahead to next year. I think particularly, given what you've just said, Nigel highlights the benefit of being able to get back to a position last year where we're not borrowing, and that will no doubt be a benefit into the future. Has anyone got any thoughts, questions, queries for Councillor Jackson or Nigel? No? Marvellous. All right then. Budget process continues, and we will no doubt be back with that again in the coming weeks to talk through. So finally then, just to put forward the recommendations on page 13 of the report, largely for noting, and ask all those in favour of those recommendations. Thank you very much. And that brings this highly efficient and effective cabinet meeting to a close. Thank you very much.